At Winfield United Methodist, Grace United Methodist Church in Winfield, Kansas, we're continuing our journey of digging deeper into the heart of the gospel revealed in the life and teachings of Jesus. And this week we're dealing with and exploring, if you will, how forgiveness surfaced as a necessary component of civil and public discourse, not just forgiveness being a way of life for those individuals following the way of Jesus, but this surfacing of forgiveness into a prominent place in civilian life happened in South Africa. A primary catalyst for this surfacing was Bishop Desmond Tutu. Karen and I had the privilege of spending a day with Tutu, which included personal conversation, as well as hearing him speak to a standing room only crowd at Oklahoma City University. Now, in South Africa, apartheid had legally come to an end. 40-year struggle to end separation of civilian rights of citizens on the basis of race was over. Nelson Mandela had been elected to the leadership of a new government. Of course, it was a time of celebration, not only in South Africa, but throughout the world, for a global coalition had been formed which assisted in putting a legal end to apartheid. Now, in that celebration, many confused that what was legally resolved meant that it was morally resolved. However, for some, including Tutu, the hard work was not over. Winning the legal battle was not the end accomplishment. Tutu tells in his story in his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, that through preaching and teaching, forgiveness, which has always been considered a characteristic in the spiritual journey, became the catalyst for a new way of relating one human being to another. Tutu led the effort based on the understanding that anger, resentment, desire for revenge did not end with the legal closure of apartheid. Only if the desire for revenge was addressed could South Africa address a new future. Tutu, a bishop of the church, was steeped in the heart of the gospel, Ubuntu, the miracle of being forgiven and forgiving. Tutu knew that forgiveness was the only resource available to the human community that could address and literally face down anger, resentment, and the desire for revenge. With this commitment of faith, it's just amazing. Tutu penetrated civilian discourse with the message of forgiveness, which enabled the government to establish the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, which placed forgiveness, which had always been the property of the spiritual community, on the table for civilian life in South Africa, And forgiveness has become the solid foundation of the future of South Africa. The end of apartheid put an end to the past, but only the foundation of forgiveness provided a new future. And it is amazing that the president and political leadership of South Africa knew that the work of forgiveness was profoundly spiritual, but that's what was needed in civilian life in South Africa. This is the story of how relevant spiritual health is to civil society. In my opinion, this movement of the Commission on Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa gives us an insight into the miracle of forgiveness as the highest calling in our personal journey of faith, as well as the highest calling in the faith community of those who follow Jesus. First, what is the insight given to those of us who have made a commitment to follow Jesus in our journey of faith? Simply stated, there is no future. There is no future that is different than the past without answering the call to be forgiving and forgiven. You see, without answering this call, we're going to be focused on the past. That's what revenge, vindictiveness, retaliation, and anger is all about. Focusing and imprisoned in the past. When these feelings of anger, resentment, desire for revenge to govern our relationship with others, it's the governance of judgment over our life. And indeed, the desire for revenge, in my opinion, excludes the possibility of one to follow Jesus. For to follow Jesus, we're called to be agents of agape love, not retaliation and revenge. In other words, Ubuntu, the miracle forgiveness. One has not answered the high calling, and one is at best a noisy gong and clanging cymbal of piety and hypocrisy, unless they have answered the high calling of Ubuntu. That's the power of the miracle forgiveness in your life and in mine. But secondly, what's the insight given to faith communities, congregations who are committed to follow Jesus? Simply stated again, there is no future. There is no future for a faith community to follow Jesus which makes room for anger, judgment, resentment, and a desire for revenge in their life together. Without the centrality of Ubuntu, the miracle of forgiveness, a faith community becomes a harbor of hate, heralding separatism and alienism, rather than a lighthouse of agape love, heralding empathy and sacrifice for others. Let me say that again. You see, without the centrality of the miracle of forgiveness, a faith community becomes a harbor of hate, heralding separatism and alienism, rather than a lighthouse of agape love, heralding empathy and sacrifice for others. You see, I believe that what was good enough for civilian life in South Africa is good enough for you, good enough for me, and good enough for the communities of faith who follow Jesus. You see, in Tutu's understanding, there was no future for South Africa without forgiveness. Ending apartheid was not enough. And we must receive that history of that country who faced down the desire for revenge by Ubuntu. For in Bishop Tutu's words, regardless of any human accomplishment, including the end of apartheid, there is no future without forgiveness. That's a whopper of a message. For your thought and conversation, I would ask these questions. What is your experience of being trapped in the past by being angry, judgmental, resentful, and having a desire for revenge? What are your experiences with communities of faith which exist as harbors of hate rather than lighthouses of agape love? And what are your stories of major accomplishments making no real difference because the high calling to Ubuntu has not been answered? There's a lot there. We look forward to our time together.